They called it a death world. Not because it was empty, oh no. It was overflowing. With chaos. With danger. With the kind of stuff that makes even battle-hardened species wet themselves in 6 limbs. Acid storms that change direction mid-strike. Gravity that pulses like a heartbeat. Wildlife so aggressive, it attacks shadows. The Galactic Council labeled the place uninhabitable. Non-viable. Do not approach. So, of course, humans signed up for a camping trip. They didn't send military squads or terraforming drones. They sent 3 volunteers, 1 tent, a survival knife, and no joke a YouTube playlist titled DIY Shelter Building on a Budget. We thought it was a suicide mission. An elaborate stunt for some bizarre Earth ritual called adventure. But then, we got the transmission. Humans. Laughing. Roasting marshmallows over a lava vent. One of them wrestling what we think was the apex predator for fun. A year later, the Death World has been renamed. Not Outpost 9. Not Expedition Site Alpha. No. It's now a 5-star extreme tourism hub hosted and guided exclusively by humans. Collision curious how that happened? Stick around. You're about to find out how humans turned certain doom into a vacation package. And hey, if this sounds like your kind of madness, hit that like button and subscribe. This one's gonna get wild. To understand the absurdity of what happened, you have to start with the aliens. Specifically, the Drevians, a species known for 3 things: bureaucracy, safety protocols, and an overwhelming fear of dirt. They pride themselves on logic, predictability, controlled environments. So when the planet designated Varnuk 7, better known now as Camp Chaos, was discovered, the Drevians were the first to analyze it. They ran the numbers. Calculated surface temperatures, atmospheric density, tectonic instability, radiation spikes, life form aggression indexes. All of it. The result: a unanimous council verdict. Unfit for colonization. Lethal. Probability of survival, 0.00007%. Naturally, they cordoned it off. Posted digital warning beacons. Wrote a 600-page report on how to avoid it. Titled it A Model of Total Uninhabitability. And that would have been that, if not for the humans. Humans, at that point, had only been part of the Galactic Council for 14 standard years. Still considered transitional sapients. Not fully trusted. Not fully understood. Definitely not expected to volunteer for suicide missions. Which is why, when their ambassador raised a hand during a council briefing and casually asked, "So, is anyone using that death planet?" the room fell into stunned silence. The Drevians blinked, vertically. The Jellary hissed in confusion. The Suthery delegation physically recoiled. And the human, Lieutenant Mark Enders, just smiled and said, "We've got a few folks who'd love to test out their gear somewhere wild. Figure it could be fun." Fun. The council took an emergency recess to process that word. Translators struggled with it. Some interpreted it as primitive thrill-seeking. Others thought it meant ceremonial self-destruction. One Drevius suggested humans might be offering a sacrificial ritual to appease the planet. Another asked if fun was a code for some kind of weaponized terraforming protocol. None of them expected the truth. The application came through 3 Earth days later. 3 names. 3 volunteers. No heavy equipment. No fleet support. No atmosphere scrubbers, fusion drills, or AI-guided settlement architecture. Just personal gear, some basic supplies, and an optional inflatable shelter. Even the paperwork was baffling. Under mission objective, all 3 wrote the same thing. Test personal endurance, record survival footage, enjoy the challenge. The Drevians were horrified. The Latharii offered grief counseling before the mission even began. The Dockery assumed it was a punishment protocol. But the humans. They packed GoPros and duct tape. The first transmission arrived 17 hours after touchdown. Visuals, grainy. Lighting, poor. Mood, euphoric. Lieutenant Anders stood ankle-deep in toxic mud, grinning like a madman. "So we made camp," he said, swatting a winged creature the size of a pizza. "No fatalities so far. Shelters holding. Air's a bit spicy, but the filter masks do the trick. Also found running water. It's only mildly corrosive." In the background, one of the others yelled, "Yo, Mark. This tree bleeds when you cut it? Is that normal?" To which Mark replied, "Depends on the tree." They laughed. The Drevians held a crisis summit. Over the next few weeks, the transmissions continued. Some were journal logs. Some were bizarre survival tutorials. A few featured commentary that made no biological or tactical sense whatsoever. Pro tip: if you roast the local mushrooms just right, they only slightly paralyze your jaw. Turns out the scorpion-wolf hybrids are territorial but only between 3 a.m. and sunrise. We just dance around them in reflective ponchos. Works like a charm. Gravity's still glitchy near the ridge, but if you sprint fast enough, you basically get a free jump boost. And always the same sign off. Still alive. Still having fun. The reactions across the galaxy varied wildly. Some species were appalled. Others were fascinated. A few quietly began studying human anatomy again, wondering if their bones were made of metal or if their pain receptors were simply vestigial. The Galactic Newsnet called it the Varnick Gamble. Alien influencers started reaction channels to human footage, gasping in horror and awe. Even the Galactic Council began assigning full-time interpreters just to decode human slang. But the humans. They kept building. Not cities. Not labs. Not factories. Just paths, campsites. Markers for safe zones. Labeled, recorded, shared. And then the real twist happened. 7 months into the expedition, a second wave of humans arrived. This time, it wasn't survivalists. It was families. Not entire colonies, just small groups. Parents. Teenagers. Grandparents. Tourists. They brought tents, hammocks, marshmallows, and water purifiers. One group even brought a guitar. They weren't settling. They were visiting. Word had spread. Camp Chaos had become a legend on Earth, a place where only the toughest, weirdest, most stubborn humans dared to tread. Naturally, it became a vacation destination. The Drevians fainted. That's when the council stepped in again, not to shut it down, but to figure out how it was even possible. A joint inspection team was dispatched, consisting of 11 species, all armored to the gills. They landed, nervous and ready for environmental collapse. What they found instead was laughter. A human teen ziplining over a canyon. A senior couple boiling local roots for tea. A group of engineers recording funniest death world moments, Volume 12 on a handheld camera. And Mark, still alive now, wearing a t-shirt that said, Death World. I call it Thursday. The official council report that followed remains one of the most reprinted documents in interstellar history. It included such lines as, human adaptability borders on the supernatural. Recommended policy, never underestimate human boredom. From now on, Earth species must be considered semi-feral until further review. Proposed designation change, Varnuk 7 to Human Exclusive Hazard Zone / Recreational Territory. Oh, and before we forget. Speech balloon quick question for you, the viewer. What's the most extreme place you've ever vacationed? Let us know in the comments, and if you think surviving a lightning snake storm sounds like your kind of fun, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You're clearly one of us. They were supposed to be irrational. That's what the alien reports said. Human psychology files marked them as emotionally erratic, chaos-tolerant, impulsively inventive. Combine that with an obsession for testing limits and doing things just to see what happens, and you get a species that most advanced civilizations had quietly filed under Do Not Engage without gloves. So naturally, the council sent an observation team to verify the situation in person. 12 delegates. From 12 of the galaxy's most logical, orderly, cautious species. They arrived on Varnuk 7 fully armored, neuro-insulated, and emotionally buffered. Some wore double translation rigs just in case the humans' dialects caused cognitive dissonance. And what did they find? Humans. Everywhere. Not settling the planet, enjoying it. One group was building a rock maze for mental clarity. Another was base jumping into a canyon with experimental gliders made from alien tree bark. 3 were running what appeared to be a guided tour for visitors, one of whom was in a wheelchair with monster-repelling spikes attached. And all of them smiling. Laughing. Living. The delegates approached carefully. The humans greeted them like old friends at a barbecue. Hey there, visitors. You here for the tour or the trauma bonding? The Drevius ambassador blinked twice. We are here to observe. Perfect, said a woman in a sun hat and cargo vest. You'll want to see the ridge before sunset. Sky glows neon, air crackles a bit, but the view's killer. Is that safe? One of the aliens asked. Nope, she chirped. But we've got spiked boots and optimism. You'll be fine. To the aliens, it was cultural whiplash. The Sutheri envoy, known for speaking only in calculated phrases, attempted a formal greeting. We offer you guarded acknowledgement. A human gave him a firm handshake, slapped him on the back, and handed him a beverage with fruit floating in it. Appreciate it? We offer you bug repellent and grilled mushrooms. Don't eat the ones that glow, though. Ask Todd, he tried one last week. Still hiccuping electricity. Todd waved with his eyebrows singed. Worth it, he called. The aliens began to panic quietly. There were no fences. No command centers. No emergency shelters. Just tents. Hammocks. Ropes tied between trees like human spiderwebs. Homemade signs reading things like, "Risk is relative. You're not lost, you're exploring." We've had worse Tuesdays. The Drevians attempted to file an on-site incident report. But the moment they mentioned high-level environmental hazard classification, one of the humans stopped them. "You're thinking too much like an insurance adjuster," he said, grinning. "We are insurance adjusters," the Drevius replied. "Ah. That explains the lack of marshmallows." There was no single leader of the humans. That baffled the council observers more than anything else. They expected a chain of command. A central structure. A figure of authority. What they found was something far worse: cooperation without hierarchy. Humans just figured things out. Together. Loudly, sometimes. Often sarcastically. But it worked. Someone needed shelter reinforcement. 10 people helped. Someone discovered a new venomous plant. A medic recorded an antidote with a smile and a high five. No one gave orders. Everyone took responsibility. "Hey, has anyone seen the guidebook for edible bugs?" "Yeah, we upgraded it. Now it includes flavor ratings." "Oh cool. Which one got 5 stars?" "The one that screams when you roast it?" Every attempt by the aliens to understand human structure failed. They asked about hierarchy. The humans gave them nicknames. They asked about logistics. The humans handed them rope. They asked about survival protocols. The humans shrugged and said, "We make it up as we go." That answer caused 3 Drevian assistants to faint. But the real turning point? It came on day 3 of the observation mission when the storm hit. Not just a storm. A Varnuk 7 storm. Magnetic cyclones, horizontal lightning, temperature drops of 40 degrees in under 30 seconds. The kind of storm that turns spaceships into sculptures. The alien team braced for impact. They activated shields. Cowered in their ship. Logged emergency messages. But the humans. They ran into it. Wearing jackets made from alien scales, goggles built from scavenged mining lenses, and boots lined with thermal foil. Why? Because someone wanted to test their wind-powered glider. "It's now or never," they yelled into the howling void. "This is deeply irrational," a Suthari delegate shouted. "It's deeply awesome," the human responded. And then launched themselves off a cliff. The aliens watched in horror. Then awe. Then confusion. And finally, reluctantly, respect. Because the human survived. More than that, they soared. The wind snapped the glider upward, carried them across the sky like a myth reborn, and dropped them on the far side of the ridge laughing and covered in static sparks. After the storm, the alien team requested an emergency debrief with the humans. Not to reprimand them. To ask questions. Real questions. How do you make decisions without a centralized command? How do you tolerate such unpredictable variables? How do you manage your emotional equilibrium under high-stress survival scenarios? The humans paused. Then answered. We argue a lot. We make jokes. We pretend like we know what we're doing. And we fix things when they break. Usually with duct tape. Sometimes with cursing. But mostly, we just try. And that was when something cracked open in the aliens. Not just their understanding but their pride. Because they realized something fundamental. Humans don't survive despite chaos. They survive because of it. They aren't trying to control the universe. They're dancing with it. One busted shoe and bruised knee at a time. So yeah. The council sent observers to study the humans. But by the time they left, they were students. And some of them signed up for the next tour. Man raising hand, and by the way, if you're still watching, tell us in the comments. Would you rather lead a team, or wing it with duct tape and guts? Whichever side you're on, make sure you subscribe. We've only just started. It all started with the worms. Big ones. No, not just big. Catastrophic. Burrowing, bioluminescent, and apparently very, very angry at vibrations. No one had seen them before. Not the survey bots. Not the satellite scans. Not even the crazy guy who catalogued Varnuk 7's screaming flowers and venomous fog. But there they were. Bursting out of the canyon floor in the middle of a human slackline competition, jaws like a mining rig, bodies like armored trains, and an uncanny sense of timing. The humans screamed. Then they cheered. Yo! Giant worms. Who had that on the survival bingo? The aliens panicked first. Sensors blared. Evac orders were drafted. 4 separate council species began recording goodbye messages. But the humans. They ran toward the canyon edge. With ropes. And flares. And peanut butter? Trust me, one guy yelled, we used to deal with bears back home. Same logic. It wasn't the same logic. But somehow, it worked. They lured the worm away with a vibrating decoy, rigged the canyon with reflective fabric, and blinded the thing with makeshift flashbangs built from old drone parts and bioluminescent moss. The worm, stunned, confused, and possibly offended, dug back underground. Before the aliens could even finish asking what just happened, the ridge cracked open. Seismic instability, the kind that makes continents fold like origami. A small research shelter, mostly alien staff, slid halfway into a fissure. Alarms screamed. Emergency bots failed. Atmospheric seals broke. And then a single voice crackled over the shared comms. This is Team Side Quest. We're nearby. Moving to assist. Team Side Quest was not an official designation. It was 3 humans, 2 volunteers, and 1 retired biology teacher who thought the phrase mission parameters sounded too boring. They'd been on a foraging run. Saw the fissure from a distance. Grabbed what rope they had, tied a sled together using leftover tent fabric, and launched themselves downhill. No approval. No clearance. Just urgency and optimism. They got there first. Inside the fractured shelter, things were bad. Temperature dropping. Gravity pulsing erratically. One Drevius was pinned under a support beam, another convulsing from atmospheric exposure. The humans didn't blink. "All right," said one, "we need 10 hands, 3 lungs, and at least 1 fool." "Good news, I brought all 3. While alien medics hesitated, waiting for proper hazard suits, the humans waded into the broken shelter with little more than filter masks and grim determination. One of them stabilized the injured with 4 tubing made from tent cord and hydration packs. Another repurposed the support beam as a splint. And the biology teacher? She rewired a busted heater using copper wire, a spork, and profanity so loud it probably scared the worms back underground. The aliens watched frozen as 3 humans risked life and limb, not for glory, not for protocol, but because, as one of them put it, they're breathing, so they're worth saving. Outside, the storm was brewing again. Not just weather. Magnetic inversion. You know, the kind of thing that causes planets to flip polarity like a coin toss. Electronics fail. Compass systems reverse. Gravity gets confused. It's like watching the planet ask, "Hey, what if up wasn't a thing anymore?" The council teams scrambled to retreat. Their ships wouldn't launch, magnetics too unstable. Their suits were shorting out. Their protocols had no solution. But the humans. They were setting up tents. "We're staying," one of them said. "You'll be trapped," an alien shouted. "We already are. So either we panic, or we plan." And humans. "We don't panic without coffee." "But you don't have coffee," the alien cried. "Exactly," said the human. "So we're definitely not wasting time screaming." They went to work. Fast. No orders needed. No arguments about procedure. Someone assessed shelter integrity. Someone else reinforced exposed landing pads with natural stone and salvaged alloy. Another dug trenches to redirect the rolling energy bursts from the storm. And when the magnetic field ripped one of the council's medevac drones into the sky, a human whistled and said, "Cool. Free fireworks." Hours passed. Then a day. The storm raged on. But so did the humans. They turned broken council modules into storm shelters. They used old camera rigs as lightning rods. They built fire pits from shattered ship metal and repurposed alien coolant as radiant heat. At one point, someone even ran a full meal delivery system using zip lines, leftover trail mix, and a daring child with no sense of fear. And then, things got worse. Because, of course, they did. The worms came back. Not just one. All of them. Dozens. Drawn by the seismic disturbances. By the storm. By the sheer noise of everything. They surrounded the ridge. Alien delegates locked down in panic. Defenses offline. Weapons fried. Nothing was left but instinct. Which, for humans, meant creativity. They didn't try to fight the worms. They redirected them. With sonic pulses. Reflections. bait trails made from thermal pads and fake scent pods. They built a noise grid. An entire auditory maze. It was insane. It was absurd. It should not have worked. But it did. Because for all their aggression, the worms were still animals. And humans. Humans had been outwitting apex predators since they were crawling out of caves. By the third day, the storm began to fade. The worms withdrew. The ground calmed. The worst had passed. And the council watched slack-jawed as humans emerged from the dust with singed clothing, busted gear, and big dumb grins. No casualties, someone reported. Unless you count Todd's eyebrows. Todd gave a thumbs up. He was still hiccuping sparks. That night, under a fractured sky and 1,000 confused stars, the aliens held a meeting. Not to assess damage. Not to file reports. To ask one question. How? How did a species survive every worst-case scenario with jokes, tape, and sheer unkillable determination? How did they take a death world and make it navigable? How did they do it with no plan, no chain of command, just teamwork and a refusal to sit still? The humans answered. We just show up. We fall down. We get back up. And if something tries to eat us, well, we improvise. And that, more than anything else, broke the mold. Because in that moment, aliens realized something horrifyingly beautiful. Human success wasn't despite the chaos. It thrived in it. They weren't sidestepping disaster. They were surfing it. Fire still with us? You've earned a high five from across the galaxy. If you haven't already hit that like button, drop a comment below, and tell us. What would you do if a worm the size of a school bus popped out of the ground mid-hike? And if you say run, you're smarter than Todd. Don't forget to subscribe because we're only halfway done with this chaos. Something changed after the storm. Not in the weather. Not in the terrain. In them. The aliens. They didn't realize it at first. They told themselves it was just adrenaline withdrawal. Or temporary madness from the stress. Some even blamed electromagnetic interference, claiming the chaos had knocked their reasoning centers slightly off orbit. But deep down, they knew. They'd seen something they couldn't unsee. Not just the worms. Or the storm. Or the duct tape miracles. They'd seen humans thrive in hell. And not by force. By choice. The Sutheri were the first to voice it. They were a logical species, mathematical by instinct. Their civilizations were built on probabilistic modeling and predictive culture theory. They didn't fear humans. They couldn't. Fear required an element of expected danger. But humans. They weren't dangerous in the traditional sense. They were unpredictable. No model could contain them. Every simulation, even with updated parameters, failed to predict human actions. They reacted too quickly, adapted too illogically, and survived situations that should have mathematically ended them. One Sutheri scientist summed it up like this. Human resilience is not a variable. It is a constant contradiction. The Gelleri, on the other hand, did fear them. Not because humans were violent. But because they weren't afraid to be uncomfortable. Pain. Risk. uncertainty. These things weren't deterrents. They were invitations. Where other species saw danger and backed away, humans said things like, "Let's see what happens. Bet we can fix it." That could be fun. It wasn't recklessness. It was defiance by habit. And to the Jellary, who had perfected avoidance over millennia, it was terrifying. The Drevians entered what they later called a collective logic failure. Their entire cultural identity was built on predictability, procedures, control. They'd spent decades categorizing humans, trying to understand them, trying to contain them with spreadsheets and analysis trees. And now, none of it mattered. Because they'd watched humans smile at annihilation. They'd watched them joke during storms, laugh during worm attacks, and grill mushrooms next to lightning vents. One Drevian technician even muttered, "They treat entropy like a roommate." And it wasn't an insult. It was a kind of reverence. Even the more emotionless species began to fray at the edges. The Kal car, whose minds were attuned to collective memory, began dreaming of fire pits and laughter. The Thresian observers, who hadn't smiled in 2 centuries, started asking about camp games. And the Garuan proud, ancient, and isolationist quietly submitted a request to send one of their own to Earth for cultural immersion. It was spreading. This strange virus. Humanity. But for the aliens who'd been there, who'd stood in the chaos, who'd felt the heat and seen the ridiculous, beautiful madness firsthand, the change was deeper. It was personal. Because for the first time, they questioned themselves. Their systems. Their assumptions. Their sterile, over-engineered lives. One Suthari delegate described it this way. "We spent lifetimes building walls, protecting ourselves from disorder. And then we watched humans walk into that same disorder and build a campfire. Some tried to resist, filed formal complaints, argued that humans were dangerous not because of violence, but because of influence. That other species might follow their lead, might start doing things for the thrill, might make decisions based on curiosity instead of metrics." It was chaos. Cultural contagion. But they were too late. The damage was done. It started small. A Lathari ship replaced its emergency manual with a single laminated page that read, "Don't panic. Ask a human." A Kal car vessel began issuing resilience badges to crew members who stayed calm during unexpected malfunctions shaped like duct tape rolls. A Drevian university added a new required reading, The Human Field Guide to Improvisation. And on Varnak 7, more ships landed. But not for research. For experience. Aliens came to learn. They came to see the broken shelter still patched with tent cloth and stubborn optimism. They came to walk the trail where Todd got zapped by gravity and lived to narrate it on 10 separate vlogs. They came to meet the biology teacher who rigged a heater with a spork and bad words. And most of all, they came to ask the humans how. How they kept going. How they didn't quit. How they smiled through things that would shatter other civilizations. And the humans. They didn't give lectures. They handed out water bottles, told funny stories, and shrugged a lot. We just deal with it. Sometimes we cry. Then we build something and try again. And if that fails, we build something worse but funnier, and that gets us through. It didn't make sense. And yet, it did. Because the truth wasn't hidden in some philosophy text or ancient code. It was right there under a makeshift tarp, with burned marshmallows and worm-repellent lotion. Humans didn't win because they were the strongest. Or the smartest. They won because they showed up, held on, and laughed when everything fell apart. By the end of the cycle, the council issued a quiet, almost embarrassed update to their classification manual. It read: Human Behavior Models. Category revised from unstable to adaptive anomaly. Recommended response: allow room for improvisation, and if possible observe from a safe, non-judgmental distance. Do not attempt to explain their methods. Just let them do the thing. Aliens still here? You've just survived a psychological storm. Now tell us in the comments. What's your favorite thing about human resilience? Is it the humor? The stubbornness? The spork-powered heaters? And if you haven't already, subscribe. We're not done with this wild ride. You'd think the hardest part was over. The worms. The storm. The spontaneous canyon collapse. Nope. That was just the prelude. Because on day 19 of the Varnick observation cycle, something shifted. Literally. The planet twitched. Not shook. Twitched. As if something deep below flexed a buried nerve reacting to all the noise above. And then the sky turned the wrong color. Not a metaphor. Physically, visibly, and objectively wrong. Green lightning. Black sunspots. A sound like metal breathing through sand. The humans looked up and said, "Well, that's new." The aliens screamed. It started with the scanners. Galactic-grade equipment designed for Class 6 stellar anomalies began throwing errors even the engineers couldn't translate. Magnetic field, nonlinear. Time readings, fluctuating by plus or minus 7 seconds. Atmosphere, temporarily inverted oxygen bands. And somewhere, deep underground, something was moving. Something big. The first theory was tectonic instability. The second theory was worse. A buried megastructure, alien in origin, ancient, waking up. Of course, the humans had a third theory. Maybe we just annoyed the planet too much. The council delegates were ready to evacuate. They didn't have a full plan, not with the magnetics still glitching comms and frying launch protocols. But they were prepared to panic in stages. Then the humans stepped in. They didn't suggest fighting it. They didn't pretend they had a master solution. They just started organizing. Not with commands, with conversations. Hey, you're good with plasma relays, right? Cool. You've got sharp claws, wanna help dig? You purple guy, you're fast. Take this rope. You're now officially in charge of not dying. One by one, the aliens were pulled into it. Not by rank. Not by chain of command. By momentum. Human momentum. The KAL car, used to shared consensus, synced their hive minds into a live problem-solving loop, but they did it in human slang. The Drevians, still twitching from procedural overload, were handed clipboards and told, "You're the checklist bosses now. You live here." The Suthari assigned their most stoic logician to team field improvisation, where she was told, "No time for math. Just trust your gut. And duct tape." And slowly, the chaos turned into a rhythm. The plan, if you could call it that, wasn't elegant. It was barely even technically sound. But it was working. Step 1. Reroute atmospheric converters to stabilize the local pressure zones. Step 2. Use the old shelter's broken transmitter arrays as a crude pulse emitter to see if the anomaly underground was responding to vibration. Step 3. Rig a geosonic poke to get the planet's attention and pray it wasn't a cosmic tantrum. And Step 4. Hold hands, cross appendages, and hope nobody exploded. It was a ridiculous plan. No protocols approved it. No species authorized it. But it had humans in it. And that meant it had momentum. 3 hours into execution, everything started to unravel as expected. The pulse array overloaded. 2 team members got launched 30 feet into the air. Todd, once again, caught fire. But the strange thing was, nobody stopped. Nobody froze. The aliens, instead of retreating, doubled down. 1 KAL linked psychic buffers to stabilize the relay. Adrevian wrote a new protocol on the spot to allow real-time adjustments. The Suthari, the same race who once took 2 years to approve a water filtration formula, rewired an emitter using their tail. In under 6 minutes. "We're adapting," one alien whispered. "We're humaning," another corrected. Then, silence. The pulse was launched. The ground stilled. The anomaly responded. A deep hum echoed through the canyons. Low. Pulsing. Like a thought rising from the dirt. Lights flickered. Air shimmered. Gravity reversed for 2 terrifying seconds, just long enough for every species to question their choices. And then, equilibrium. Just like that. The anomaly faded. The sky returned to normal. No fire. No apocalypse. Just quiet. And a shared breath. Across 12 species. In sync. The humans didn't cheer right away. They were too busy checking vitals, patching wounds, and arguing about which part of the plan definitely should not have worked but somehow did. Todd was smoking slightly. Again. But smiling. Everyone was. Even the Suthari logician cracked a grin, although she claimed it was a muscle spasm due to strain. No one believed her. The council didn't know what to do. They had no precedent. No legislation. No pre-written policy for emergency planetary anomaly averted through interspecies improvisational chaos. So they did the only thing they could. They invited the humans to explain. The meeting was broadcast live across 140 systems. The humans showed up late. Not out of disrespect. They were fixing the stairs outside the chamber because someone noticed the railing was a bit wobbly. Once seated, they didn't bring data cubes or holographic simulations. They brought a box. Inside, hand-drawn sketches. A broken compass. Melted goggles. A list of made-up team names like Worm Wranglers and Duct Tape Avengers. and one sticky note that read, "We didn't know what we were doing. But we did it anyway." Silence followed. Then laughter. Not mockery. Joy. From delegates who hadn't laughed on record in decades. From scholars who'd once scoffed at humanity. From soldiers who'd once feared them. Now, they understood them. Because humans hadn't just survived. They'd brought others with them. Through madness. Through failure. Through a storm of nonsense. And somehow, everyone was better for it. So the council made a ruling. Unofficial, but historic. When faced with a logical crisis, consult the humans. Give them rope, tape, and snacks. Then get out of the way. Studio microphones still watching? You just witnessed interstellar history. If duct tape diplomacy and accidental planetary saves are your kind of content, go ahead and hit subscribe. And comment below. Which part of that plan do you think actually made the difference? Was it the pulse? The teamwork? Or Todd catching fire again? They didn't throw a parade. That's not the human way. There were no fireworks, no banners, no galactic declarations broadcast in 500 languages. Instead, when the anomaly faded and the skies finally settled, the humans just kept going. They patched tents. They cooked dinner. They helped an alien engineer fix his melted boot. No ceremony. No victory speech. Just another day survived. Another problem solved. Another weird thing added to the list of, well, that happened. And maybe that was the most human thing of all. Not the improvisation. Not the defiance. Not even the jokes, though those had become legendary. It was the ability to return to normal, after everything. To find comfort not in triumph, but in routine. The council delegates stayed for 3 more days. Not because they were required to, but because they wanted to. Some said it was for safety protocol reviews. Others claimed they were conducting final post-event assessments. But really? They just couldn't stop watching. Watching humans argue over who got the last ration bar. Watching them laugh at worm repellent that smelled like old socks. Watching them build benches out of broken drone wings and then sit on them like nothing was weird. It was mesmerizing. One Drevian protocol obsessed, always by the book, was seen helping a human clean a cooking pot. With his hands. No gloves. When asked later why, he replied, "It just seemed easier than filing a sanitation request." And then he smiled. Smiled. The Galactic Psychology Board is still studying the footage. Across the camp, the KAL car had stopped syncing their memories. Not out of failure. Out of curiosity. They wanted to see what it felt like to be surprised. To not know what came next. To react without consensus. One of them was heard saying, "It's like waking up without instructions." "Is that scary?" someone asked. "No," the KAL car replied. "It's exciting." Even the Sutheri, once known for their detachment, were different. One of their delegates, previously famous for publishing a 900-page thesis titled Emotion, a Biological Inconvenience, was caught crying. When asked why, she didn't even deny it. I saw a child give his last energy cell to power a heating coil for the group. No one asked him to. No reward. Just kindness. She paused. I don't think we understand kindness. Not like they do. By the end of the third day, something unthinkable happened. The council delegates requested to stay longer. Not to study. Not to monitor. To help. To build. To belong. And the humans. They didn't ask questions. They just made room. Scooted over on the log benches. Shared tools. Offered food. One of them handed a Garuan soldier a screwdriver and said, "You break it, you fix it. Welcome to the crew." The Garuan grunted. Then grinned. And that's how it started. Not an alliance. Not a treaty. But a community. One forged in absurdity. Held together with tape, teamwork, and a willingness to say, "You're weird, but you're welcome." A week after the anomaly ended, a council representative asked to record an official closing statement. They wanted something formal. Something galactically appropriate. The humans handed them a napkin. On it, scribbled in marker, were 3 words. Still not dead. The council laughed. Then against every tradition they approved it. Unanimously. From there, the changes came fast. Subtle at first. Then system-wide. Council protocols were amended to allow for adaptive improvisation in extreme field conditions. A new advisory unit was created, part engineering, part psychology, part comedy troupe led by humans. They called it the Ono Team. Official name, Operational Hazard Negotiation and Optimization. The acronym was accidental. Probably. But perhaps the greatest change wasn't procedural. It was cultural. Alien children began playing games called human survival. The rules were unclear, but they usually involved pretending to be attacked by something absurd and shouting, "Quick! Use the spoon!" Car schools introduced creative failure exercises. Suthery libraries added human fiction to their catalogs under a new genre, emotional chaos. And the Drevians. They started teaching duct tape repair workshops. Voluntarily. As for Varnuk 7, it was no longer labeled a death world. Its new designation. Human Interactivity Zone Tier 1 Resilience Site. But no one called it that. They just called it Camp Chaos. And every year, visitors arrived. Some to test themselves. Some to learn. Some just to sit by the fire and listen to stories about the time Todd fell into a magnetic ravine and came out smarter. The accuracy of that story is still debated. But behind the jokes, behind the duct tape and chaos and improbable survival rates, there was something else. Something unspoken. Something sacred. It was the understanding shared now across hundreds of worlds that humans weren't just problem solvers. They were hope incarnate. Messy. Stubborn. Ridiculous. But hopeful. Even when everything fell apart. Especially when everything fell apart. They had a phrase for it. A simple one. Passed along in campfires, council chambers, repair bays, and training schools. Said when the odds were bad. When the systems failed. When logic said to quit. The phrase, "Do it the human way." Loudspeaker still with us? You've made it through storms, worms, anomalies, and Todd's endless survival record. So here's your moment. Backhand index pointing right, comment below. What does doing it the human way mean to you? And hey, if you've laughed, felt something, or just learned that you really need duct tape in your life, subscribe. Because in the next story, we're going to space jail. And guess who brought snacks? Months later, in a quiet corner of Galactic Space Sector Thetan 9, a new directive was quietly issued by the Interstellar Council. No ceremony. No broadcast. Just a single entry in the Unified Policy Index, line 3,842,771b. In events of catastrophic failure, unpredictable planetary behavior, or system-wide procedural breakdown, consult human personnel immediately. Optional, provide snacks. The directive was met with mixed reactions. Some applauded it. Others panicked. A few species took it as a sign of the end times. But most? They shrugged. Because by then, humans were everywhere. Not dominating. Just, helping. In their own strange way. Fixing plasma couplings with shoelaces. Saving diplomatic talks with sarcasm. Turning survival disasters into campfire stories. One Garuan admiral was overheard saying, "They're like cosmic raccoons. Loud. Clever. Somehow always inside systems they shouldn't be near. But, we'd be screwed without them." On Earth, the news barely made a dent. A few memes trend. Someone sold official interstellar consultant t-shirts. Todd got a sponsorship deal from a sock company. Shockproof socks approved by survival icon Todd trademark. But for most humans, it was just Tuesday. They weren't in it for the glory. They never were. They were in it for the challenge. The joke. The satisfaction of turning certain doom into mild inconvenience. And as for Camp Chaos, it became a rite of passage. A place where young aliens and humans alike tested their mettle. Where laughter echoed louder than warnings. Where failure was just another step toward a ridiculous, improvised success. One carved into the bones of a once dead planet now known for life, laughter, and the occasional explosive tent. So what's next? Oh, you know how it goes. Someone's gonna break a moon. Someone else will try to improve galactic AI with duct tape and optimism. And someone, probably Todd, will end up running a worm riding school for extreme tourists. Because that's the thing about humanity. They don't just survive. They make surviving fun. They make danger ridiculous. And somehow impossibly they make everyone around them better. And somewhere, in a corner of the galaxy not yet mapped, a council scout ship lands on a strange new world. Their systems begin to fail. Their landing gear won't retract. Local wildlife is circling. And before anyone can panic, the intern asks, "Wait, do we have a human on board?" Studio microphone. That's it, explorers. You've officially survived a full tour of the human condition in space. Speech balloon. Drop a comment. Would you volunteer for a mission to Camp Chaos? Or would you just send snacks and prayers? And don't forget to hit subscribe. Because next time, we're heading to a peace summit where someone brings karaoke. And spoiler alert, humans win that too.